Welcome back to Klepper's Corner, Today in History. There are certain dates that don't just sit quietly on the calendar. Some dates don't behave. Some dates pop up, like that one high school friend who shows up at the reunion with a flamethrower and a TED Talk. And January 22nd is one of those dates. It's not a date, it's a historical buffet where the chef keeps shouting, "Surprise!" and then drops another plate on the floor. So today, we're diving into 6 stories from across the centuries. Stories about empires collapsing, revolutions blossoming, airplanes expanding like they're trying to swallow an entire airport, and cultural moments that made us question everything, including why the Joker suddenly had better acting chops than the rest of Hollywood combined. Segment 1. The Victorian sun finally sets. January 22nd, 1901 gave us the end of Queen Victoria and the end of the century-long mood she imposed on half the planet. Queen Victoria didn't just rule. She ruled so long that Britain basically measured technological progress by how many years she still refused to smile. She oversaw the rise of trains, telephones, photographs, and a military so stretched out that half the world was covered in red on a map like a bad rash that needed ointment. And even as the empire was wobbling, Boer wars, industrial rivals, the constant dread that one day Germany might stop sending awkward Christmas cards, she kept going. And then she didn't. She dies at Osborne House, and suddenly the entire royal family turns into a crossover episode of every European monarchy ever. Wilhelm II is there, holding her hand like he's auditioning for the role of favorite grandson, even though he's going to kick off World War I in about 13 years. And Bertie, her son, is standing there thinking, great, I've waited 60 years to be king, and now everyone just wants to talk about how sad they are Grandma died. Victoria's death is the moment the 19th century finally looks up, adjusts its monocle, and says, well, that was fun. Good luck with the 20th century. Spoiler, the 20th century responds by immediately breaking everything. Segment 2. The Zulu army teaches the British the meaning of regret. Now let's go back to 1879, when Britain's confidence was so inflated it could have been declared a weather phenomenon. They invade Zululand because Britain was constitutionally incapable of leaving any nation alone, especially one minding its own business. Lord Chelmsford rides in, thinking he's conducting a military seminar about how bullets beat spears, and the Zulu aren't invited because they'd ruin the PowerPoint. Then the Zulus show up with 20,000 warriors, perfect tactical formation, and a vibe that says, we didn't schedule a fight today, but we'll absolutely make time. The British camp at Isandlwana is wide open, unfortified, and managed with the kind of strategic logic you expect from a group project where no one wants responsibility. Ammunition distribution breaks down because apparently the British Army decided this was a great day to test a new policy called, what if we hand out bullets like it's Black Friday at a sad hardware store? The Zulu swallow the camp whole. The empire's myth of invincibility doesn't just crack, it shatters like a royal teacup dropped on a marble floor. And then, as if to say they aren't done yet, the reserve force marches to Rorke's Drift, where 150 British soldiers perform the absolute best impression of a Home Depot barricade in human history. It is a wild day for empire, a triumphant day for indigenous power, and a devastating day for anyone who assumed Victorian arrogance was bulletproof. Segment 3. Russia loses its faith in the Tsar, and in the Tsar's ability to read a room. Flash forward to 1905. Russia, winter, workers, and a plan involving appealing to the Tsar like he's your cosmic HR representative. Father Georgy Gapone organizes a massive peaceful march because he believes the Tsar, Nicholas II, a man who makes indecision look decisive, will help them out if they just explain how terrible the working conditions are. Thousands walk toward the Winter Palace with icons, portraits, crosses. This isn't a revolution, this is a field trip. And Nicholas isn't even home. He ghosted the entire city. The army panics, the crowd keeps walking, and then the rifles come out. Bloody Sunday becomes the day the Russian people collectively say, oh, The little father doesn't love us. The spell breaks. Years of loyalty dissolve in minutes. And Gapone declares there is no czar anymore, which is the Russian political equivalent of sending a breakup text in all caps. This moment becomes the dress rehearsal for 1917. You can almost hear Lenin reading the news thinking, oh, this is usable. The autocracy dies spiritually years before it dies physically, and January 22nd gets credit for lighting the fuse. Segment 4, Roe versus Wade, rights, and a country that immediately starts arguing with itself. January 22nd, 1973 delivers Roe versus Wade, a Supreme Court decision that gives the country the ability to fight about one ruling nonstop for 50 years, an endurance test unmatched in American history. Justice Blackmun writes a decision saying you have a constitutional right to privacy that includes the right to make decisions about your own body. And instantly, half the country says, yes, exactly. And the other half says, I have notes. The trimester framework becomes the national instruction manual no one asked for, but everyone has an opinion about. Roe doesn't just reshape medical law, it reshapes political identity. Parties harden, movements mobilize, and on the same day, Lyndon Baines Johnson dies. The man who gave America civil rights protections, Medicare, Medicaid, the Voting Rights Act. He exits just as the next chapter of American rights begins. It's like the universe said, one era of rights closes as another opens. And then, 50 years later, Dobbs comes along and says, actually, let's hit reset, sparking another wave of protests, legislation, angst, and the ongoing national tradition of never agreeing on anything, ever. Segment 5, France and Germany hug it out so Europe stops exploding. January 22nd, 1963 brings us the Élysée Treaty, also known as the moment France and Germany say, let's stop punching each other every 20 years. Europe had gotten used to the whole Continental War starter pack, misunderstandings, rivalries, the occasional trench. And de Gaulle and Adenauer decide it's time to build something that doesn't require rebuilding cities every generation. They sign a friendship treaty, a literal friendship treaty. Regular meetings, youth exchanges, defense coordination. Meanwhile, de Gaulle is hoping this leads to Europe becoming a giant independent power bloc. But the German parliament adds a preamble saying, hey, France, we love you, but we also still love the United States. And de Gaulle reacts like someone who just found out their partner still keeps photos of their ex. But it works. The Franco-German engine becomes the core of a united Europe. And suddenly, the continent stops acting like a powder keg and starts acting like an economic alliance that argues primarily about cheese regulations and agricultural subsidies. Segment 6, technology, culture, and modern shockwaves. January 22nd doesn't slow down when it hits the modern era. In 1970, the Boeing 747 takes off for the first time with passengers, looking like a plane that swallowed a smaller plane and then said, I guess I'm this now. It democratizes global travel and becomes the sky's version of a shopping mall. In 1968, Apollo 5 tests the lunar module, proving it can blast itself away from the descent stage mid-flight, which is exactly the kind of test you run when you want to land humans on the moon without immediately losing them there forever. In 1943, Spearfish, South Dakota warms 49 degrees in 2 minutes because the wind decided to cosplay as a malfunctioning thermostat. January 22nd is chaos even in the weather department. Then we get to culture. Apple's 1984 ad airs once and becomes so iconic that Super Bowl ads start competing with the actual game. Kobe Bryant drops 81 points in 2006, casually lighting the Raptors on fire like he's speedrunning basketball. Heath Ledger dies in 2008, months before redefining the Joker, a tragedy that reshapes Hollywood's understanding of mental strain and performance. And January 22nd is not done. It shows us the Mendiola massacre in 1987, where the Philippine government betrays its own people a year after toppling a dictator. It gives us Evo Morales in 2006, becoming Bolivia's first indigenous president and flipping centuries of hierarchy on their head. And it gives us the founding of the Swiss Guard in 1506. Because even the Vatican needed someone to hold a halberd and look simultaneously decorative and dangerous. In conclusion, January 22nd is less a date and more a cosmic reminder that history likes drama. It marks the deaths of queens and the births of revolutions. It celebrates unification and exposes brutality. It lifts planes into the sky, sends modules toward the moon, reshapes culture, and records temperatures that feel like a prank. It captures humanity at its highest aspirations and its lowest betrayals. And every year, when we hit January 22nd, the calendar quietly whispers, "Buckle up. Something big probably happened today."